Hey everybody, happy Wednesday evening live tutorial. Welcome back to our regular streaming schedule after 2 weeks of abbreviated holiday streaming. We are back to our full streaming schedule. That means you are going to see me on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, and on Facebook Live tonight at 6 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday at noon, and 6 p.m. Friday at 6 p.m. with our Freeform Friday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. with another tutorial. We do also have a live merchandise sale this evening at 7:30 p.m. and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. and we have new beads. Also, I never did get to 50% off teardrops on our last sale before the new year, so we're going to start off with some 50% off teardrops tonight, and then we're going to go to brand new beads. It's very exciting. I've got new stuff to show you. I've got lots and lots of vroom. I've got lots of garnet for y'all tonight. So anybody who's looking for some vroom, we have the vroom that you've been looking for. All right, so before we get to vroom in all of its varying shapes and sizes and permutations, we're gonna have a lesson. We're gonna do the tapestry bangle. This is one of my favorite projects that I've ever come up with, and not that I'm saying that I invented this, because I'm sure that many people have done this technique before me, but it did kind of cool. Yay! Felicity was asking about teardrops. So we are going to, we're going to do 50% off teardrops, and then we're going to switch to new beads on the sale at 7:30. But tapestry bangle is one of my favorite projects that I've ever come up with. Like I said, I'm sure that I'm not the actual originator of this project, but it did come out of my own head. So I'm very excited to be teaching it to y'all tonight. Like I said, one of my favorites for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just cool looking. Second of all, it is a really good vehicle for using up leftovers and bits of this, bits of that, because you don't have to have really any kind of symmetry at all on this project if you don't want to. Now I'm being ultimately boring tonight. Yay! I'm guessing Turbo is there to help. Just a guess. I could be wrong.
Turbo or Turbo and Darcy?
I'm going to be ultimately boring tonight. I'm going to use actually all the same bead. I've got these black spinels. But again, this is a really, really fun project for using up all of your onesie, twosie, extra beads. I will say the one thing about this project is it works best with flatter beads. So spherical beads and large rondelle beads, not ideal for this project. Anything that's rice shaped, coin shaped, even rectangular, like chiclet shaped, square, just anything that's flatter is going to work better for this project. So let's do a quick rundown of tools and supplies for this evening's tutorial. You're going to need some wire. I'm using some 16 gauge gold filled. That's going to be for the base of my bracelet. You could use 14 gauge if you wanted something chunkier. I wouldn't go any smaller than 16 though, unless you were doing a very, very tiny, delicate one. Then maybe 18 gauge, but I'm going to say 16 gauge is your sweet spot. On this one, you're going to need some 26 gauge wire. That's going to be for actually wrapping on your beads. You're going to need a lot of this. You're going to need probably between 6 and 8 feet of this to make one bracelet. I'm not even kidding. So this is not one of those projects you should start if you're light on 26 gauge wire. If it fits through your beads, you could use 24 gauge instead of 26 gauge as well. And then you're going to need some beads. Like I said, flatter beads are better for this. So I've got these faceted rice shaped black spinels that I'm going to be using today. But any sort of, wow, I haven't even started and my hands are, oh, what are my hands so incredibly dirty from? I have absolutely no idea why my hands are this dirty. Oh well. These things happen when you work at the bead shop. But yeah, so anything that's a flatter shape of bead is going to work well. And once again, I mean, I guess I must have been playing with this wire while I was talking to you guys, doing my introduction, because I was not, before this broadcast, fighting with wire. I was fighting with technology and working on the highlights reel. I'm gonna say I'll have that one done for you guys by the end of the month, but I don't think my computer did that, so I must have just been messing with the wire, not thinking about it while I was saying hi to all of you guys. Anyway, So 16 gauge wire, 26 gauge wire, beads, flat beads, and that's actually it for supplies. As far as tools go, you're going to need your basic wire working tools. That is going to be your round nose pliers, your chain nose pliers. These are actually a flat nose because I still think I have stolen all of the chain nose from the store and taken them home with me, which is great, except for the fact that means they're not here, and a wire cutter. And then you're also going to need a bench block or bench block equivalent, so something upon which, hey look, there's my camera, something upon which to hammer, and you are going to need something with which to hammer, and try not to drop everything on Heather. Yay, I didn't.
Yay.
So I'm going to be using
Or anything.
I didn't drop anything on Heather. It's exciting. I'm going to be using my chasing hammer for that, and that's what you need as far as tools go. You may find it helpful to have a file or an emery board handy. That's just going to be for the end of the hook part of your bracelet. Yay! And by the way, hi everybody. I didn't even say hi. Jan, Aso, Lori, and everyone else who's out there. Holy crap. Hi everybody else who's out there. So great to see you all now that we're back from the holidays, back to our regular streaming schedule. So let's go ahead and get started on this project. So we're going to start with our 16 gauge wire. So let's talk for a second about length that you need to cut for this project. So I call the project Tapestry Bangle, but Bangle is a bit of a misnomer because it's not technically a bangle bracelet. It has a clasp, so it's a faux bangle, which I really like because I like to wear my bangles fairly tight, and so if it has a clasp, if it's not a true bangle, you know you can fit it a little bit more tightly than it's a fake. Heather's making up words, y'all.
This is not the first time.
It's true. This is not the first time, but that's a pretty. Excuse me for a moment. So,
sorry, I didn't realize it was gonna go quite like that.
You didn't realize you were gonna derail me this early in the night? Yeah, this does not bode well for the sales stream. That's all I have to say about that. But so.
Oh no.
You can fit it more tightly than something that actually has to go over your hand, which can be very nice and as far as having something a little more close fitting. So if you typically wear like a 7-inch bracelet for like a stretchy bracelet or a bracelet with a clasp, you can go with that measurement, maybe plus a little bit for your bangle, and then you need to add a little bit of extra for your loop and your hook. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself a 7-inch bangle. I'm just owning that word that Heather made up. And then with that extra that I need again for my loop and my hook, I'm going to cut 8 inches. So basically you want to cut yourself an extra inch on top of whatever, length or circumference you want for your bangle. Bangle.
Gives a whole new wrinkle to newfangled, doesn't it?
It does. It's true.
I'm here all year.
Well, good. Okay, so now I've cut my piece of wire. I'm going to go ahead and grab my round nose pliers, and I want to make my hook and my loop. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and if you've got, I'm a bit of a picky princess in this particular instance of like, I don't like the nipped ends of the wire, so your flush wire cutter cuts flush really on only one side of the cutter. So the flat side cuts flush, the other side cuts this kind of pointed. So what has happened here is I cut flush, and whatever I wanted flush was on this side, and this is what's left over on the end of the spool. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip that off because I like my ends to be flush if at all possible. Then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm just going to roll that around to make a loop, grab it right at the bottom and bring it back to center it up. Okay, so that's going to be the receptacle for my hook. And then I'm going to go to the other side of my wire and I'm going to curve it up to make a hook. Now, when you're making the hook, you're just basically going to bend your wire up like that don't bend it too far back or it's going to be almost impossible to hook this thing on your wrist. And now we're going to take the hook and the hook receptacle, link them together like so, and then we're going to finger shape our bangle. Now, if we wanted to, we could totally do this, and if I were smart, I probably would have done this on a bracelet mandrel, but I realize not everybody has a bracelet mandrel in their tool stash, so I just want to prove to myself and everyone else that you can actually do this with just your fingers. It just takes a wee bit of patience, which is not usually a virtue that I possess, but I'm going to pretend for the sake of the internet that I do.
It's hard to have patience when you only have an hour.
Well, that's fair, and it's hard to have patience when you only have an hour and you routinely start 15 to 20 minutes late. ASO. I was watching ASO's stream the other night, and he was talking about Corvus not being on. He was like, maybe she's on Allison time.
I hope our sweet new viewer made it.
Yes, I hope so too. Speaking of Allison time, we had a darling, adorable person call at like 6 o'clock on the dot, thinking that she was missing us online, and it's like, no, we're just not that timely. Okay, so now I've got it shaped. Now is the time to try it on, because I feel like maybe this is a little bit bigger than I want it to be. So yeah, that's pretty gigantic on me. That's a lot bigger than I want it to be. So if that is the case, if you find you missized it, super easy to fix. Just, I usually will downsize from this end just because this is easier to reconstruct than this. Not that either of them is particularly difficult, but I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to nip off the end of that and then redo my little hook part, hook it up, and yeah, that's more my size. Now, my size isn't necessarily everyone else's size, so that's the cool thing about making your own bracelets and whatnot, is that you can size them however you want to. I've got smaller than average wrists, so I like my things to be fairly, to fit me, and a lot of commercially made things don't. They're a little bit too, kind of, well, like these commercially made bangle bracelets, for instance. Like, I can't wear them without stretchy bracelets to hold them in place because they will literally fall right off of my hands. So it's nice to be able to make things for myself that I can wear that I don't have to worry about falling off. Conversely, if you have larger than average wrists, you can make things that fit you comfortably instead of things that are extra tight. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hammer this. The reason that I wanted to try it on and do all of the shaping and everything before I hammered it is because once I hammer it, it's going to essentially get set in its shape. Hammering work hardens your metal and it makes it remember the shape that it's in whenever it's hammered, and so you always want to do all of your shaping first and then your hammering. So I'm going to take my bench block and I'm going to put my bracelet on my bench block. I'm going to leave it closed. Okay, I'm going to leave it latched, clasped, pick a word. And I'm going to take my chasing hammer. So chasing hammer, for anybody who's not familiar with, is a hammer that's specifically made for hammering metal or wire. It's a convex hammer. That way you can hit your metal with the center of the hammer and not get a tool mark from the edge of the hammer on your metal. So I'm going to try and hit with the center of my hammer flat on my metal. And it's going to get a little bit loud here on the Beading Dream stream for a minute, so if you need to turn your volume down, you can go ahead and do so. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hammer this all the way around. And of course I'm going to do my level best not to smash my little fingies while I do that. And your bracelet is going to get a little bit bigger when you hammer it because you are stretching out the, you're flattening and widening the metal, so that's another reason that you don't want it to be too big to start with, because then it's just going to be gigantic. Now, you'll notice my metal warped when I hammered it, and that's pretty normal, because when you're hammering, you are literally rearranging the molecular structure of the metal. So I'm just going to take my chain nose and I'm just going to twist that back and just reform my shape a bit. And in a bracelet like this, what keeps it closed is tension. So I'm going to do this again after I've got all my beads on, but I want to just stretch this out a bit so that, see, now this isn't wanting to kind of fall out of that loop like it was a second ago, because there's a little bit of tension on it, and hammering helps with that as well. So now it's time to start putting on my beads, which means I need a scissors to cut my strand. Whoops. There we go. Alright, I'm going to start with my 26 gauge wire, and I'm probably going to need several pieces of 26 gauge wire to finish this project, because if I start with one piece that's long enough to finish the whole project, I'm going to be working with like a 8 or 10 foot piece of wire, and that's just way more difficult than it needs to be. So I'm just going to cut myself about 5 feet of wire. How do I know it's 5 feet? Because I'm about 5 feet 4 inches tall and I'm doing my wingspan. Just in case anyone was wondering how tall I am, that's how tall I am. If I stand up really straight and take a deep breath. If I slouch, I'm only 5'3". Alright, so I've got my 5 foot approximately piece of 26 gauge wire, and I'm going to start by anchoring it onto this part of my bracelet. So I'm just going to hold that onto my bracelet like so. Now do yourself a huge favor. I had a student who did this to herself today. Don't try and do this, okay? Don't give yourself just a tiny little nubbin to hang on to. Give yourself a solid inch of wire so that you can get a really good hold on that wire as you're anchoring it onto your bracelet. Otherwise, it's just going to be heinously difficult, and why make things harder than they need to be? And then I'm going to wrap my wire around my bracelet about 4 or 5 times. Now, since we have this opening here, it's a lot easier if you go through that opening rather than trying to fish your wire, like, fish it and pull it through the center like that. That tends to lead to your wire getting really kinked, which is going to lead you to difficulties later on in the process. So use this opening that you have in your bracelet to make your life easier. And it's actually not bad. You should also pay attention to what you're doing, unlike me. And what you don't want is, see how that's a little overlapped there? We don't want that. There we go. What we do want is we want our coils to be nice and tight together. We can totally cheat, squeeze them together with our fingernail, and now it's time to start actually putting on my beads. So I'm going to take one of my black spinel ovals, and I'm going to thread it. So I'm going to go all the way to the end of my wire. I'm going to thread that onto my 26 gauge wire. If your wire end is a little crinkly, just go ahead and straighten that out. If you have trouble getting your wire through your bead, the easiest way to do it is to grab your chain nose pliers and go right almost to the point where the wire is entering the bead and just give it a little push. Once you get enough of the wire through that you can grab it with your pliers, grab it and then pull your bead down. Especially when you're dealing with the 26 gauge that's so thin, pushing is always going to be more difficult than pulling. So only push as much as you need to in order to get a little bit so you can pull. Alright, so I'm going to pull that bead almost all the way down to my frame, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it over and push it backwards just a little bit. So see how that gives me kind of an up and over with my wire, so that what I can do is ride my bead essentially across the curve of my frame. And I want it to be level, which means I actually need a little bit more up and over on that side for it to be level. And then I'm just going to hold it on the outside of my frame and then wrap around my frame. And you do want it to be on the outside. It's going to want to roll to the inside. Try not to let it. Keep it on the outside. And I'm going to wrap about 5 times, and then I'm going to put on my next bead. So that's 3. Again, I'm still going through that opening there. 4 and 5. Okay, next bead. So again, back to the end of my wire. Bead goes on the wire. Alright, if I need to push it through, grab your pliers. And so notice I'm really close to the hole of that bead. I'm just gonna, and if once isn't enough, just keep feeding little bits through to once again I've got that little piece that I can grab and I can pull. And then again, I want to put it almost all the way down to my frame, and then I just want to bend it, push it back to get that up and over, and then on the other side wrap around about 5 times. Okay, and then I'm going to continue adding beads until I've got beads all the way around my frame. Now, the way that I have been doing it up until now is kind of the logical way. It's not the fastest way to do it. So if you're trying to maximize your speed on this, the fastest way to do it is to actually string a bunch of beads on at once. So I'm going to string on 10 beads. We're going to see how far that takes me. And that doesn't fit at all. The reason that it is more efficient to string on multiple beads at once is because you're not switching tools, you're not switching tasks back and forth, you're not having to constantly, you know, search for your chain nose pliers, pick them up, put them down, all of that. So that's 3, 4, and that's 10. Now, if you're going to do it this way, once you've got all your beads on, like I will have in just a moment. Come on. Alright, last one. Once you got all your beads on, you do want to make sure that you then take the end of your wire and just flip it over and make a little twist in it so that your beads don't fall off as you're doing this, because it's obviously counterproductive to string them all on and then have them all fall right back off again. But now all I have to do is pull down a bead, do my little up and over, and then wrap 2, 3, 4, 5, and then pull down another bead. So they are already on there, so I'm not having to go all the way back to the head of my wire, string on a bead, etc., etc. They're already there. But again, if that is confusing to you, or if you feel like it's just going to turn into a giant mess, then feel free to do it the way I was doing it at the beginning of the tutorial, right? It's nice, I think, to know how to maximize your efficiency, but don't feel like you're not maximizing your efficiency if you're just frustrating yourself in the process. That's not. Then you're like me when I was messing with Adobe Premiere Pro an hour ago, which at least I finally, thanks to lots of Googling, figured out most of what I needed from that, but oofda. Learning curve, y'all, learning curve. This pandemic's been all about learning to do things that I never thought I would need to know how to do, like streaming. 3, 4. Okay, so right now I've got my beads stacking up around the outside of my cuff. They look, or my bangle, my fangle, as Heather called it, Right now they look really awkward. They look very weird. They're kind of wobbly. That's okay. That's, at this point in the process, that's what you're gonna have. When we go back and do the wire wrapping around them, that's when we're gonna stabilize them, and that's when they're gonna start to be a little bit nicer looking, and it's gonna start to look more like an actual, you know, decent piece of jewelry, as opposed to some random thing that, you know, just got tacked together on the fly. And once we stabilize them, that'll stop them also wanting to roll to the inside or to the outside. Okay, so again, I'm just going to pull up a bead, do my up and over, and wrap. Trying not to completely destroy my clothing with my wire. I'm only having middling success on that. Okay, again, up and over like so, and then we're gonna wrap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another bead. Let go of my clothing. Okay, so that was my 10th bead of what I strung on there. Okay, I think I want to put one more on, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to scooch my beads a little bit closer together so that I have a little bit more room at the end, because it's one of those situations where it's like just barely big enough for a bead. So now I am going to go back to the end of my wire. I can just clip off this little twist that I made. I'm going to put on one more bead, one that's a little smaller. You are shorter than all the rest. No, go through. Go through, I said. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and add that last bead on there. She says, whilst utterly failing to do so. There. Up and over, and then I want to wrap. And I want to wrap about 5 times to secure it. So pretty much the same way I've been doing this whole project. Okay, so now I've got all my beads on my bracelet. Now I'm going to start traveling back this way, anchoring my beads with additional wire wrapping. So the way that that works is I'm just going to go back to the closest bead to where I ended, and I'm just going to wrap around the base of the bead like so. And if you need to kind of hold it and brace it at the beginning of that, that's fine. By the time you've got, you know, 4, 5, or 6 wraps around, it should be pretty stable on its own. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure to stay for the most part underneath the bead. If you come up and over the bead too much, your wraps are just going to kind of spring off. They're not going to stay because there's nothing to hold them on there. So you want to stay as much as you can kind of beneath the curve of the bead like so. And then when you feel like you've stabilized that bead sufficiently, you're happy with the way it looks, you're just going to take one wrap in between, and then you're going to go to your next bead. Now, I did not, because I was paying attention to the camera and not necessarily what I was doing, and the up and overs on these aren't completely level, so they're going to be a little, I'm better, the ones I did earlier are better, but these last couple beads just aren't going to be level in their little nests, and that's, at this point, something that I'm just going to decide to live with. Now notice I'm running out of wire at this point really quickly, like all I have left is about a foot. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap that up. You can hold it however you need to in order to get this to work nicely for you. I usually will alternate between actually holding the bead as I am right now and then holding the bead and the bracelet. Of course, the thing there is you've got to keep kind of alternating your hands. Alright, so I'm going to do my one wrap in between. I'm going to start this next one. And then also sort of spinning the bracelet around sometimes is also a good strategy. Okay, so I got 3 wraps on there, and now I'm down to about 2 inches of wire. So I'm going to wrap that off right here. And I don't need to wrap it 5 times, but I want to wrap it more than once. So I'm just going to wrap it 3 times to sort of bind it off, and then I can trim that wire and use my flat pliers to just tuck that nice and flat against my frame. I want to make sure that I don't have any pointy stabby bits. And now it's time for me to add a new wire. So I'm going to grab, I wasn't joking when I said you're going to use a lot of wire for this. Alright, so I'm going to grab another 5-foot piece of wire. Actually, I think I was underestimating when I said 10 feet. It's probably going to be closer to 15, because I feel like I'm going to need to add another wire after this one. So when you're adding a wire, just to make sure that it's secure, what I like to do is I like to go back to the bead before, the bead that I'm working on, and wrap around right before that bead, a couple, 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then go, sorry, keep it on camera, go fully around that bead, and then do my 1 wrap in between that bead and the next bead, and then continue on. And that way you're not just starting here and immediately trying to reinforce that bead. It's just a little bit more secure. So now we're going to just continue this wrapping until this wire runs out, and then we're going to add another one. So 1 wrap in between, and then on to the next one. So how many wraps am I taking around each bead? 3, 4, 5, 6. About a dozen. It's about 12 wraps that I'm taking in around each bead. And then 1 in between. Doesn't really matter which direction you wrap. You can wrap clockwise or counterclockwise. You don't even have to wrap the same direction around each bead, because you have that anchoring wrap in between. So essentially, you know, each bead wrap is a new beginning, as it were. Now that being said, I'm a creature of habit, so I tend to wrap the same way around each bead, but if you don't, it's not going to create any problems with your project. Okay, so once again, now I'm down to just a couple of inches of wire. So I'm going to take my 1 wrap, go around this one. Oh, so close. Okay, so I just have this little tiny nubbin of wire, but it is just enough for me to wrap around 1.5 times. Press down. Okay, so I'm about halfway done. Now it's time for another piece of wire. You don't necessarily have to work in 5-foot increments. You can work in longer increments if you want. Once again, I just find that if it gets too long, it's just unwieldy. And once again, if it's too unwieldy, you're just making more work for yourself. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the bead that's before the bead that I'm currently working on. And I'm just going to wrap that around a couple, 3 times to secure it. Then I'm going to go around this bead once, and then around the frame once, and then onward we go. So this part is fun. It works up pretty quickly at this point, and it's very gratifying to see this kind of weird, wonky ants on a log thing. Ah, it's a Corvus! Hi, Corvus! This kind of ants on a log thing that you have transform into something that looks much more polished and much more finished, I think. Corvus, the beads are black like your soul. But it's gold, not silver, sorry. If I was really making a Corvus bracelet, it would have been silver.
But they are black and shiny like your soul.
They are black and shiny like Corvus's soul, it's true. Okay, so again, it's about a dozen wraps around each bead, and then one wrap in between. Oh, I'm gonna run out before my last 3 beads.
Oh no.
That's okay. I could just add another one. It's all good. Alright, and so this is literally the last of the 26 gauge on my spool, so hopefully this is enough to finish the project. Once again. Alright, so this is the bead I need to start on, so I'm going to go back to the bead before. Wrap around. Couple 3 times. Once around there. Once in between, and then we're going to continue wrapping these last 3 beads. So, what would I do if I ran out of wire? If I ran out of wire and I had no more wire, no more 26 gauge wire to finish the project, at this point, what I would probably do, if that, and I do, but what I would probably do if that happened is I would probably actually just take off this last bead here, and possibly take off this bead here just to make it match. There's nothing wrong with, just in case. Oh, thank you. Well, or what apparently I would do is have Heather bring me a shiny brand new spool of 26 gauge gold filled wire.
But if you don't have a Heather, because you can't have hers.
Right. If you don't have a Heather and you're running out of wire, you ran out of wire, I would probably take this bead off and maybe take this bead off as well. How I would do that is I would basically just, trim these wires, take that bead off, and then just wrap them off. But it's always, when you're making a bracelet like this, it's not a bad thing to have no beads on the bottom because that's what gets bumped and banged more often. So there's really nothing wrong with taking off that last bead if you need to, but I have plenty of 26 gauge wire, especially since I have a whole brand new spool of it, but this piece actually was enough to finish the project. So then I'm going to finish it by wrapping off about 3 or 4 times. So as you can see, this is a pretty quick project as well, because it's 6:56 and I'm almost done with said project. Okay, so I wrapped that around 3 or 4 times. Now I just have to get rid of all of these unsightly ends. So step 1 on that is just every little hanging out piece of wire, just trim it as close as you can. And then step 2 is going to be press it down with your chain nose pliers to the point where you can't feel it, okay? So you don't want it to be stabby at all. Oh yay, that's awesome, Corvus. Oh, this would be a really cool to do with scarabs, with scarab beads kind of marching across it. That would be really, really fun.
Oh, yeah.
And the shape of them is gonna would lend themselves really, really well. Or you could do like scarabs and lapis and coral and turquoise. So again, just when you've got so many wire ends as this, it is worth the time and effort to make sure that they are all tucked in, because you do not want to stab yourself or your clients or your friends. Okay, maybe sometimes your friends, but it's, it doesn't speak, well of your jewelry if it, lacerates people, generally speaking. So I'm just taking the time to trim all of these ends off and then make sure that they're all tucked in nice and snug. Again, to the point where I can't feel them. Also, just all scratching and uncomfortableness aside, if they're just hanging out there, they can catch on things and not only damage the things upon which they catch, but damage your bracelet as well. Alright, and these are my last 2. And again, just make sure all those ends are nice and pressed down. And a good trick, at least for these end ones, is you can actually take your pliers, grab the ends, and you can rotate them around. That's going to simultaneously tighten and flatten them. Of course, you don't want to do that, which is rotate your hook. And then once again, what's going to hold this closed on your wrist is tension, so we want to open this up a bit so that when we fasten it, we actually have a little bit of tension that's going to help hold that closed. And then the last thing we get to do is put it on. Yay! There we go. That's it. That's our tapestry bangle, y'all. It's actually a really easy, fun, and quick project. It's a great way to use up leftovers if you have leftovers, and definitely a really fun piece to make a really fun piece to wear. So that's our tapestry bangle class for this evening. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us on the Beading Dreams stream for our first tutorial stream of the new year. Right? I think so. I think that's correct.
Yes.
Yay! Alright, thank you all so much for hanging out with us on the Beading Dreams tutorial stream. So I'm Allison from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. We are going to follow up this tutorial stream in about half an hour with a live merchandise sale. That live merchandise sale is going to feature 50% off teardrops and new beads. The new beads will not be 50% off, but they're new and exciting and awesome and shiny, and we've got a lot of garnet, so there's a lot of vroom coming up on the 7:40 sale. So if you're going to join us for the sale, that's awesome. Go ahead and grab yourself a cocktail, grab yourself a snack, grab yourself some hydration, get comfy, get cozy, and get ready for some bead retail therapy in the comfort of your living room, office, or wherever you watch the Beading Dreams stream. If you're not going to join us for the sale, thanks so much for joining us for the tutorial. Don't forget, we are back on this channel, twitch.tv/beadingdream, and on Facebook Live tomorrow at noon with our Crystal Vine earrings tutorial, and then back at 6 p.m. with our Torch Thursday tutorial, which is simple soldered filigree. So more tutorials for you tomorrow, and then Freeform Friday, and then another tutorial and sale for you on Saturday. So everyone have a great half an hour, and we will see you all back on this channel, twitch.tv/beadingdream for the sale at 7:30. Toodaloo!